What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. The safest picks in the draft for the 2019 fantasy football season. And these are players that I feel I can recommend to you guys as being safe, as being absolutely worth their ADP with a very low chance of busting. So what I've done is I've gone through different positions and different portions of the draft to try and find the players that I feel are the safest draft picks. I'm only including players that go outside of the top 20 ADP because pretty much everyone, not everyone, but pretty much everyone in that top 20 is safe and has a ton of upside. And it's not very fun for me to sit here and tell you that Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey are safe. We all know that. I want to give you players that are going later in the draft in ranges where there are unsafe players to point out some guys that I really feel confident in. Before we start, let's do the stat of the day. So, last season, among quarterbacks with at least 500 passing yards on deep passes, who had the lowest number of interceptions on those deep passes? So not lowest amount of interceptions in total. On the deep passes, they had at least 500 passing yards. Who had the lowest amount of interceptions on those deep passes? Also, wanted to remind everyone that you can become a premium member of our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Gain access to all of the rankings and projections that I talk about in these videos by becoming a premium member. It's the cheapest premium package in the industry, so you don't have to worry about spending a ton of money on it. So, with all that being said, let's see what makes a draft pick safe. So I want to talk about kind of what I think about as a safe pick. And you can be a safe pick without checking off, 100% of the boxes based on where your ADP is. But in general, this is kind of what I think about when I'm thinking about a pick. Are they safe or not? Do they have a concerning injury history? That doesn't mean do they have an injury history, because pretty much every player that you draft has some sort of injury history. Football's a dangerous sport. Guys get hurt. But do they have a concerning injury history? Like, have they torn their ACL 3 times, the same one? Or do they every single season have these hamstring injuries or something? That's what I'm talking about when I say concerning. Are they a rookie? That adds risk. But were they drafted high? If they're a rookie that was drafted in the 3rd round, that's much different than a rookie drafted in the top 5. Like, those are insanely different things. So where were they drafted if they were a rookie? That determines how safe they are as a pick. Are they changing teams? Players that change teams are going into an entirely new situation. And so you need to look at that and say, well, how is this different from where they were in the prior season? Typically, it's just risky in general. Even if you think that they're changing teams and it's like a static move, if they're changing teams and they're going to a much better situation, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But if they're changing teams and you're like, it's probably the same, but you don't really know, that's risky. So we want to try and avoid that where we can. And also, is the offense around them changing? Do they have a new coaching staff that's going to completely change the offense in a worse way? Are they, and when I say a worse way, I mean, not that they're just going to come in and it's like, because you don't typically hire a coach that's going to be terrible, but are they shifting the offense away from ground and pound towards the pass and you're trying to get a running back that can't catch? That would be in a worse way for that running back. But did other things change? Did they bring in more talent in the receiving game to where there's more competition for targets? The best changes are when people leave the offense and now there's more targets, but there are situations where guys get drafted or guys get signed in free agency where now there's a lot more competition for targets that wasn't there in the past. So even if the quarterback and the head coach are the same, maybe the team's structured a little bit differently. So that's kind of where I'm going with these guys. So let's just jump into the list that I've come up with. So the first guy, Marty Cooper, and it might feel strange calling Marty Cooper safe, and there might be a few guys in this list where you're a little confused why I'm calling him safe, but he honestly is. He's been over 1,000 yards in 4 of his first 5 seasons. He's by far the number 1 target on the Cowboys offense. He's still going to be up and down, so there are going to be weeks when you're frustrated with his performance, but realistically, he's the only real threat they have in their wide receiver core. Gallup is good, and he's going to take a step forward this season, but Cooper is absolutely their top target week in and week out. He averaged a little over 8 targets and 80 receiving yards per game after joining the Cowboys last season. That would put him in the top 10 for both categories if he continued this season, and he changed teams halfway through the year. It's not that he was vastly different player in the first half and the second half, but I honestly expected him to be worse when he changed teams, because wide receivers that change teams even in an off season struggle. You're going to a whole new environment. So changing teams, the next week you're playing for this other guy, that's tough. That's a really difficult thing to do. So he played really well after going through that, which is a big vote of confidence that I have in drafting him. Give him a whole new offseason, and those numbers, honestly, should probably increase. He's still just 25 years old, and Sports Injury Predictor has him to miss just a game and a half. So we don't have an injury concern. He didn't change teams in the offseason. He changed teams last season, and I think he's going to be good to go this year. He's still extremely young. He's my 9th highest projected wide receiver, and I have him ranked 9th as well, and that's 3 spots above both consensus and ADP. So I think he's going to be worth the pick this season because he's finally part of a consistent offense, and he finally has a reliable quarterback. Next guy on the list, O.J. Howard, and we all know the athleticism is there. 88th percentile SparkX score, 97th percentile agility score, 98th percentile height-adjusted speed score. Dude's athletic. We know that without a shadow of doubt. He's from that tight end class that is one of the better tight end classes that we've ever seen. But if we take a look at what he's done over these first 2 seasons, to me, it's pretty clear that he's the tight end 4 behind the big 3. I don't think there's a rational argument for him to be ahead of or with that first tier of Kelsey, Kittle, and Ertz in whatever order you kind of want Ertz and Kittle. I have it Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, but he's not in that class. But he's pretty clearly leading that second tier. If you remove the game where he left early due to injury last season, and not the game he left in the fourth quarter, but the game that he was hurt, and I believe it was week 4, remove that, and he's on pace for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns as a second-year tight end. And a lot of those games that go into that is he was limited due to the injury. He was limited a lot of last season, and the fact that Humphries is gone really helps him. And I know that you probably just laughed when I said that, but Humphries had over 100 targets last season, and he was the 11th most targeted wide receiver from week 7 on. Humphries got a ton of volume in that offense, and all that's gone. And that's the area of the field that O.J. Howard operates. That those targets are short, and they're towards the middle of the field. That's where O.J. Howard's going to be. And I'm not saying that O.J. Howard is just a dink and dump guy, but you get rid of 100 targets, and the 11th most targeted wide receiver from week 7 on, that's a ton of volume over the middle of the field that is going to be shifted towards O.J. Howard. The ankle injuries do not concern me as of right now. If he injures it again, then I'll start to be a little bit concerned and think that maybe this is a pattern. But I don't think it's enough to look at a guy who has a couple high ankle sprains and say that, we just can't draft him anymore, because there are players with a much more concerning injury history than O.J. Howard. So I think he has a lot of upside for that 5th or 6th round. Kind of depends on the league size, the format, and everything. But that 5th or 6th round ADP, I think that's a really good range for him and something that you can feel safe in targeting after you've taken those running backs and wide receivers early. So, you're in the 6th round and you've already got 3 running backs, 2 wide receivers. Take a shot on O.J. Howard, because that's a really good start to your roster. Next, second wide receiver on the list is Brandon Cooks. And for me, Brandon Cooks is the perfect 4th round wide receiver. You can grab him in the 4th round, do it every time. Well, not every time. If you're in like 10 leagues, don't take him in every league. Brandon Cooks is going too late. The thing is, he's not going to move up. It's not one of these situations where we're like, oh, this guy's going too late. He'll be a few rounds earlier come August. No, there's really not that much room for him to move up because of the talent ahead of him. And what we know for Brandon Cooks is everything we look for in a safety pick. He's going to be on an elite offense. The coach and the quarterback are the same as last season. He's produced over 1,000 yards in 4 consecutive years. He hasn't missed a game since his rookie season in 2014. There isn't any added competition for targets, and that's not even taken into consideration that Kupp's probably going to be limited or not himself early or maybe even for the entire season. So that's more targets that could be shifted his way. So everything points to Cooks having another great year for fantasy. He's finished as the wide receiver 14, 9, 12, and 13 over the last 4 seasons, yet he's going as the wide receiver 16. How much sense does that make? So this is not usual to find someone this safe with this much upside in the 4th round. So I absolutely love him in the 4th round. Another guy I love, first running back on the list, is Josh Jacobs. And most teams that spend a 1st round pick on a running back use them a ton. We see Penny last season is probably the only one that I can think of, at least off the top of my head, where they were used a lot less than we expected them to to be used, at least when they were taken. But when you take a running back in the first round, teams use them because teams like to be right. That was the pick that the Raiders used in the trade for Khalil Mack. So they trade away Khalil Mack, they get this pick and turn it into Josh Jacobs. And you hear me all the time say that front offices like to be right. This is that to the extreme. Not only do they want to show that they were right with the pick, spending a first-round pick on a running back, but also with the trade. It's like a double we want to be right. So they're going to give him every possible chance to succeed. And while it was 100% a bad pick from an organizational standpoint, and while I also don't think he's that amazing of a running back, he's extremely safe for fantasy purposes because literally any running back in his situation is going to succeed. You don't have to be that good. Given the volume and the opportunity that he's going to have, he's just going to be good. There's absolutely a chance also that he's better than I think. We haven't even seen him play in the NFL. I just happen to not think he's that amazing. He wasn't worth the first round pick for sure, but maybe he's better than I think. And my projection on him isn't that great. It says the running back 21, which is exactly where he is in ECR, and it's exactly where he is in ADP. But my projection's also really reasonable. If you look at it, he should hit that projection. So while he's not like a steal or anything, if you get him, you're in the draft and he's there right where he's supposed to be, honestly take him. Because the path to him busting is the only chance if he gets hurt. And since we can't predict injuries, he has no real concerning injury history. Take him because it's a safe pick for the volume he's going to get. So I like him. First quarterback, and actually only quarterback I'm going to talk about because Dare just did a video on quarterbacks, I believe, what was that, Saturday or Sunday. But recently just did a video on quarterbacks Saturday. I want to say it was Saturday. Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is going as the quarterback 13 in the 10th round. And while I always say you should wait on quarterback, I am okay taking Murray this season. I did in an expert mock draft for a magazine, and I took Kyler Murray. I don't even remember what round. It was probably the 8th round, but it was also a 16-team league, 14 or 16-team league. It was a bigger league. So I like where he's going in the 10th round right now because he's going to be good. He's absolutely going to start week 1, and he's going to thrive on this Cardinals new look offense. His supporting cast, David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Isabella, Butler, RSJ, it's a lot more dangerous than people think. I know a lot of people, most people, are going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, he doesn't have a very good cast. No, that's a really good supporting cast. That is a lot of talent on that roster. And I know Larry Fitz isn't young, but it's a young roster, and it's a young core of very talented skill position players. So it is a lot more dangerous than people think, and you're going to be, I promise you, you're going to be in your hometown drafts, and people are not going to be able to name more than 2 of their skill position players. 3, maybe 3. They're not going to be able to do it. And so they're going to be sitting there being like, well, who's he going to throw to? I'll pass on him. So he's going to fall in some of your hometown leagues, and he just shouldn't. They had some of the worst play calling I've ever seen in my life last season, and that's what people are going to remember because it's the last thing that happened, and people only remember the last thing that happened. Kliff Kingsbury is going to turn this offense around, and Kyler is how he's going to do it. Not only are they going to lead the league in plays run, but Kyler also adds a very safe floor with his legs. Now, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not going to put up those kinds of numbers with his legs, but at just under 450 projected rushing yards, I have him as quarterback 7. So he doesn't need to be Lamar Jackson running around for 800 to 900 rushing yards. At around that 450 mark, that's good enough for him to slot in as a quarterback 7. And he's going as the quarterback 13. And honestly, 450, if you've seen Kyler play, that's very reasonable. It's a very reasonable projection for him. So I think he's going to have a ton of opportunity. I think he's a great talent. And I really just don't even need the preseason to know he's going to be good for fantasy. So I think he's going to crush this season, and I think he's absolutely worth the pick. Another wide receiver on this list, second to last wide receiver, is Donte Pettis. And Pettis is the clear number 1 wide receiver on ascending offense with an above-average quarterback. He was absolutely amazing to end last season, and the team loves him. I mean, the team loves this guy. He averaged 14 half PPR points per game over the last 5 weeks when he finally looked healthy, and that's as a rookie when his quarterback had a torn ACL. Pettis is my 29th highest projected wide receiver, and he's being taken as the wide receiver 34. And that's according to both ADP and ECR. So both of them have him at 34. Honestly, my projection at the wide receiver 29 is giving him a good amount of regression in yards per reception and touchdowns per reception. So I have him doing worse than he did on a per play rate last season by a good amount, and I have him ranked as the wide receiver 29, projected and ranked as the wide receiver 29. I do think that the 49ers are going to run the ball a good amount this season, but assuming that Jimmy G looks good in camp, they have a lot of weapons to feature in the passing game. This isn't a situation where Pettis is the only good option and teams can just sell it to stop him. They've got Kittle, who everyone knows is amazing, as the main focus for defenses, but they also get McKinnon back. They signed Coleman, and both of them are going to have really big roles in the passing game. I think Coleman more than McKinnon. Pettis is going to be the top targeted wide receiver, and teams are not going to be able to shift the defense to stop him. So I think Pettis is an extremely safe pick. The last running back I'll talk about is Kenyan Drake. Not a whole lot has changed for the Dolphins skill position players. The wide receivers are basically the same. They have Gesicki still at tight end. Drake and Balaj are still both the 1-2, clearly in that order. They upgraded quarterback with Josh Rosen, and no matter what you think about him, he is still an upgrade. But besides him, it's the same players in that offense. And they do have a new head coach and new offensive coordinator, but that's really not going to have that big of an impact on Drake. He's still clearly the number one, and he's going to catch a lot of passes, and he's just 25 years old. Doesn't have a concerning injury history. He's coming off the board at the running back 25 in that early 5th round range. He's my 18th highest projected running back, and I have him at the running back 21 in my rankings. And he's one of those players where you look at the end of the season and it doesn't look that amazing. You're like, oh, those are his stats? He didn't finish that high. And then he's in like the top 15. There are certain players that just score in a way where that's possible. Last season, he had under 540 rushing and receiving yards, still finished as the running back 17. I have him for 872 rushing yards, yet he still has the 18th highest projection. Last season, he had the 39th most carries among running backs. That's crazy. He had 7.5 carries per game. There's no way he gets less than that. So he's young. He can catch passes. He's going to see more carries, and he already finished much higher than his ADP. Well, why is he going as running back 25? So that's an extremely safe pick for me. And the last safe pick is Deshawn Hamilton, going towards the end of drafts. And Emanuel Sanders is trying to return for week 1, but I'd be shocked if he returned to anywhere near 100%. 32-year-olds just don't come back from Achilles injuries at 100% right away, especially when it happens that late in the season. And Hamilton's going to be the Broncos' starting slot wide receiver week 1. He had a very low yards per reception last season, but I fully expect him to end in that 10 to 11 range. So I've added in positive regression into his projection, and his role should generate anywhere from 105 to 115 targets. So as of recording this right now, I have him as the 35th highest projected wide receiver at ranking 41. That's 7 spots above ECR and 20 spots above his current ADP. He's going to give you a decent reception floor with a chance to score more touchdowns because, touchdowns have a lot of variance. I have him projected at 5.2, but realistically, he could be anywhere from 2 to 10. I mean, touchdowns they just come with a lot of variance. So there's a chance that he increases there. There's a chance that he thrives in the slot role. There's a chance that, he's got a really good agility score, decent Spark X score, a pretty good breakout age. I mean, there's a chance that he takes a massive step forward this season. And if he does any of those things, he's going to smash his ADP. So if none of that happens, he's a good pick. But if even one of these things happens, he gets lucky with touchdowns, he's better than we think, he thrives in that role, he gets more targets than we think, he's going to smash the ADP. So I have him as an extremely safe pick. And that is the list. That is the list of players that I feel at different portions in the draft, different positions, are safe. And if you can fit some of these into your roster, then go ahead and take some really risky players. Were you risky in taking Gurley in the 2nd round? Okay, maybe you should target some safer players later just in case that doesn't work out for you. And remember, if you guys want to see my rankings, you want to see all the projections, you want some machine learning models for game predictions, more stuff than that, check out the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Become a premium member, the cheapest premium subscription on the market. And honestly, it gives just as much, if not more, than all of the premium packages. So that's the end of this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, how about we hit that like button? How about we subscribe if we are new? Thanks for watching.